I call this practice is not perfect. Meditation and the practice of meditation are two very different things. And I've written here many, many times how meditation is first of all about building a habit. And only later, and for many of us much later, can it be said that we are meditating. Like the scaffolding that is used on a building when we're building it, meditation practice is just that. It's practicing meditation, and it's not meditation itself. The practice, or the habit-building part of meditation, has to eventually be let go of, or even removed, leaving room for the actual meditation itself. In order to learn to meditate, we must practice. And we must practice this process of meditation. We must learn it. It's a little like those molds that my mom used to have that formed jello when I was a kid. When the mold was taken away, the form and the jello remained. This is sometimes called muscle memory, or just plain habit. Now the question arises, how do we know when it's time to remove the scaffolding? To stop practicing. Luckily, meditation is organic enough that the scaffolding just melts away and we kind of walk out of it. When I used to ask my first Dharma teacher questions like this, he would often respond, "How do you know when you have to go to the bathroom?" You just know. Few of us probably actually love the rote practice part of learning to meditate. But I know that most or all of us will love meditating once we learn how to do it. And why? Because actual meditation is a clear and luminous state, one that we would very much rather stay in than fall out of. And while in the beginning it's almost impossible to get into that state, later it's equally impossible to fall out of it, at least so I'm told. The problem for me has always been to be able to distinguish the forming from that which is formed. The scaffolding from the meditation, the baby from the bathwater. I tend to become attached to the scaffolding, or worse, I think that Dharma practice is meditating, and it's just not so. The great Tibetan meditation masters tell us that not only we each must learn to rest in the natural nature of the mind, but they say that we often already do so every day, but we're just not aware of it. Actual meditation, then, is resting in the mind's nature and being aware of doing so at the same time. This suggests that what's lacking in learning meditation is not something we need to get from the outside, not something else we somehow have to add on or get, but rather it's just an awareness of what we already have, an awareness of what's already there, of the mind itself. And awareness too can become habitual, which is why we practice, in order to form that habit. And it follows then that all meditation practice is designed to eventually allow us to recognize and become aware of the nature of the mind itself, which we've always had, which nature up till now somehow we've managed to ignore. I mean, what kind of geniuses are we that we can successfully ignore, the truest thing there is? I mean, I really wonder about that. In other words, we're never going to get anywhere other than exactly where we already are. And the goal of practicing meditation is to somehow become aware of what we now already have, which is our mind. This is just ancient wisdom. So we practice meditation until we become aware by that practice of what meditation actually is, because we don't know. After which the mind itself becomes something that we can finally recognize and work on. It's not a stranger to us. And here's a key thought. All of this assumes that we don't know what meditation is. And for most of us, that's a fact. Before we manage to actually meditate, how could we have any idea? We have no idea of how to become aware of the natural state of the mind that we already experience, but that we're not yet aware of. How do we learn to be aware of something that we're not already aware of? That's a good question. The Buddhist teachers attempt to point out the nature of the mind to anyone who will pay attention, and this is even called the pointing out instructions. And the nature of the mind is so close to us that we can't seem to get enough distance or perspective on it to resolve it, to see, or to be aware of it. And that's why the first major step in true meditation practice is called recognition, because it's recognizing the true nature of our mind. How our mind is, how our mind works. We can't work with something that we don't know exists. And it's important to add that recognition, it's not enlightenment, not anything close to enlightenment. However, it is the means through which we can at last actually meditate. And with that, make progress of our own, on our own, and without a teacher. A teacher is just that. It's a teacher. Once we are taught to recognize the nature of our own mind by our teacher, then we can see for ourselves how to work on it. I mean, that's the whole point. Sure, after recognition, the teacher may be able to help us further with techniques to more readily yet work the mind. But really, essentially, their job is over. It's done. So we practice meditation until we achieve this recognition of the mind's true nature, after which there's no longer practice. We no longer practice. But instead, we then actually begin to meditate, but without the training wheels of effort, of blindly practicing, of rote practice. Recognizing the mind's true nature is the first step on the road to realization, to what's been called enlightenment. However, recognition is not enlightenment. If we learn, let's say, a dance step, there's some point where we're no longer learning it. Instead, we're just dancing. Meditation practice is like that. It's a practice, a sounds like this, that hopefully eventually gives way to just the natural awareness of the nature of the mind. After that, we are actually meditating, and we can begin to perfect our meditation. Before that, we're just practicing, and kind of blindly at that. When we practice a musical instrument, we already know what music sounds like. However, when we practice meditation, we have no idea what actual meditation is or feels like because we haven't had it. And to make matters worse, most of us have formed our own opinion, from books, friends, teachers, or we've formed our own opinion of what meditation should be like. And unfortunately, we hold that preconception up as a standard that somehow we're supposed to meet. This is maybe perhaps the major obstacle for beginners to actual meditation. Now, quote, practicing meditation, unquote, means finding our way in the dark, more or less, until we somehow recognize the true nature of the mind and how it works. And then we begin to actually meditate. One of the scariest teachings that I've ever heard, Buddhist teachings, is that the statement that we have virtually no chance of ever stumbling on the nature of the mind. The greatest Buddhist teachers that I know have made it just crystal clear that we need a guide. We need someone who actually knows the nature of the mind themselves to work with us and to point out to us, if we can grasp it, if we're ready, the true nature of the mind. If we are afraid to seek help, we should change our mind about that and just go out and get some help as soon as we can. The meditation practice we do should help us form a mental habit that facilitates true or actual meditation, while not becoming a habit itself. The practice should not become our habit. We've got to move beyond the practice. And, this is what the following little didactic poem I wrote is about. The habit we want to form is the habit of meditation. We want to meditate. And we don't want to end up with the habit of just practicing meditation. I hope that makes sense. This poem is called Practice a Habit. Meditation, while not practice, is a habit that can be practiced. Practice builds habits, but should not itself become a habit. In other words, practice to form a habit, but don't make a habit of it.